There is a suffocating, heavy sensation that occurs in the middle of a conversation with a specific type of human being, a sensation that completely paralyzes your mind. You know exactly what I am talking about. You are standing there, engaged in what you thought was a normal interaction, but suddenly, the ground beneath your feet begins to shift. You know deep in your bones that you are being twisted, manipulated, and unfairly blamed. The narrative is being rewritten right in front of your eyes. Your throat becomes incredibly dry. Your chest tightens. You try to defend yourself using basic logic, facts, and chronological truth. But every single word you speak only seems to tighten the invisible noose around your own neck. The more you explain, the more guilty they make you feel. You leave the interaction feeling entirely exhausted, drained of your vital life force, completely doubting your own memory and questioning your own sanity. You believe that you failed because you were not articulate enough, or because you were not smart enough to win the argument. Listen to me with absolute, surgical clarity. This profound, devastating mental exhaustion is not a sign of your weakness, and it is certainly not a lack of intelligence. You are not bad at communicating. You have just been the unknowing victim of a highly orchestrated biological hijacking. You have been subjected to a dark, predatory form of conversational hypnosis. The emotional predator does not communicate with you to reach an understanding. They intentionally overload your limbic system with chaotic data to completely bypass your logical brain. You are not in a conversation. You are in a psychological trance. Today, we are going to permanently shatter this illusion. I will reveal the 4 martial phases of the pattern interrupt. I will teach you the exact, devastating neuro-linguistic tactic required to break a manipulator's script in exactly 3 seconds, returning the absolute power of your reality back to your prefrontal cortex. But listen to me with unshakable, terrifying reverence. The 4th phase is the absolute lethal frontier, where an estimated 99% of people completely crumble and fail. They fail because it demands that you withstand a level of raw, agonizing psychological tension that will burn your fragile, people-pleasing ego to absolute ashes. If you are truly ready to tear their script to pieces, step completely out of the trance and assume the sovereign throne of your own mind. Walk with me now. Settle your physical body. Anchor the soles of your feet deeply and heavily into the earth beneath you. Lower your center of gravity, relax your jaw, and let the frantic, buzzing frequencies of the modern world fall completely silent. To forge the sharp, invisible blade that will cut these manipulative strings, we must first deeply understand exactly how the puppet master weaves the web. We must map the battlefield of your own biology. This brings us to the first martial discipline of our teaching: understanding the architecture of the trance and the cold, mechanical reality of the predator's script. When you interact with a normal, healthy human being, the exchange of words is a bridge built for mutual understanding. You speak, they listen, they process the information, and they respond. It is a dynamic, living organism of shared reality. But when you step into the gravitational pull of a narcissist, a manipulator, or an emotional vampire, you must realize a cold, terrifying truth that will fundamentally change how you view human interaction forever. They are not having a conversation with you. They are running a software program. They are executing a highly rehearsed, deeply ingrained psychological script. This script is a rigid sequence of neuro-linguistic triggers designed by their own deep insecurities to do one specific, parasitic thing: destabilize your central nervous system. They do not care about the objective facts of the situation. They do not care about fairness, and they certainly do not care about your feelings. They only care about altering your biological state, because when you are emotional, when you are angry, confused, or desperately defending yourself, you become highly suggestible. You become a battery that they can drain to feed their own starving ego. In the ancient observational philosophy of the Shaolin Temple, we look to the absolute brutal honesty of the natural world to understand the mechanics of conflict. Consider the silent, deadly architecture of the spider. In the deep forest, The spider does not engage in a violent, physical wrestling match with its prey. To chase a flying insect and fight it physically would require a massive expenditure of vital energy, and it would put the spider's own life at severe risk. The spider is a master of passive, lethal strategy. Instead of fighting, the spider simply weaves a vast, nearly invisible vibrational web across the path of the prey. When the prey unknowingly flies into the sticky threads, the spider does not attack immediately. It simply waits in the dark. The prey panics. It realizes it is trapped. It thrashes its wings with violent desperation. It fights with every ounce of its physical strength to free itself from the trap. But the brutal, terrifying physics of the web dictate that every single movement the prey makes, every frantic vibration it sends down the silk, and every ounce of kinetic energy it burns fighting back, only wraps the sticky threads tighter and tighter around its own body. The prey literally exhausts itself to death through its own desperate resistance. The spider merely walks over when the struggle is completely over and consumes the energy of the defeated. The emotional predator is the spider, and their dark, chaotic script is the web. When they launch an unprovoked, passive-aggressive accusation at you out of nowhere, they are spinning the silk. When they suddenly shift the blame onto your shoulders for a mistake that they clearly committed, they are spinning the silk. When you confront them with a simple, logical question, and they unleash a chaotic, suffocating torrent of contradictory statements, historical grievances, and pure nonsense, a tactic behavioral psychologists refer to as a word salad. They are wrapping the web tightly around your mind. And here is where you make the catastrophic, exhausting error that seals your fate. Your immediate, unmastered instinct is to defend your honor. Your logical brain, your prefrontal cortex, desperately wants to correct their false narrative. You believe that if you just bring the right facts, if you carefully explain the chronological timeline of events, or if you raise your voice just enough to show them how much they are hurting you, they will suddenly experience a moral epiphany and apologize. You do not realize that your logical defense is the exact, frantic thrashing of the prey, trapped in the web. Every single time you argue back, every time you desperately try to justify your actions to someone who is committed to misunderstanding you, you are generating the exact friction they need to keep you trapped. You are feeding their script. You are proving to their primitive brain that their conversational hypnosis is working perfectly, because you are reacting exactly the way the script predicted you would react. By throwing multiple, chaotic, false accusations at you simultaneously, they violently overload your working memory. Your brain simply cannot process the sheer volume of lies and manipulation at once, and so your system crashes. Your amygdala fires. The moment your heart rate spikes, your breathing becomes shallow, and you feel that hot, rising panic in your chest. The predator has won the war. They have successfully bypassed your logic, placed you into a submissive emotional trance, and they are now entirely dictating your reality. To break this dark hypnosis, you cannot fight the web. You cannot use logic against a psychological script that was specifically designed to consume logic and spit it back out as poison. You cannot argue with a machine. You must learn how to generate a catastrophic biological glitch in their programming. You must step entirely outside of the expected parameters of their script. You must learn the devastating, invisible martial art of the 3-second interrupt. Every single human brain operates on fundamental, predictable patterns. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, your central nervous system relies on rigid sequences of events to conserve biological energy. When someone extends their hand, your brain automatically triggers the muscular sequence to reach out and shake it. When someone says, "Hello," your neurological architecture instantly cues the response, "How are you?" If a stranger walks up to you on the street, looks you dead in the eyes, and suddenly barks aggressively like a dog, your brain experiences a catastrophic, terrifying interruption. The predictable sequence is completely shattered. Your working memory violently freezes. You cannot continue your previous thought, and you cannot execute your planned behavior, because your entire neurological system must immediately stop, reboot, and frantically process this bizarre, unexpected anomaly. In the dark, clinical science of neuro-linguistic programming, this phenomenon is known as a pattern interrupt. In the ancient, blood-stained martial arts of the Shaolin temple, it is the absolute mastery of the sudden void. It is the profound, terrifying realization that the most devastating, lethal counterattack in human conflict is not a harder punch, a louder scream, or a sharper argument. The ultimate weapon is the complete, abrupt, and unpredictable removal of the target. When an emotional predator initiates their script, when they suddenly raise their voice over a trivial matter, when they brilliantly twist your innocent words into a malicious weapon, or when they drop a heavy, guilt-inducing accusation right in the middle of a calm environment, their primitive brain is entirely locked into a highly specific, heavily rehearsed neurological pathway. They have already anticipated your reaction. They have already written your desperate lines into their script. They fully expect you to widen your eyes in defensive shock. They expect the pitch of your voice to rise in panic. They expect you to scramble desperately for a logical excuse, or to counterattack with your own unmastered anger. Their entire biological momentum is leaning heavily forward, aggressively waiting to crash into the solid, predictable wall of your ego. To execute the 3-second interrupt, you must completely evaporate. You must deny them the wall. You must let them fall into the abyss. The very millisecond the manipulative statement leaves their mouth and hangs in the physical space between you, your unmastered biological instinct will scream at you to respond immediately. You will feel a burning, urgent pressure rising in your chest, demanding that you defend your honor, correct the timeline, and stop the lie before it becomes reality. You must violently, ruthlessly suppress this reflex. You do not speak. You do not sigh heavily. You do not cross your arms in a defensive posture, and you do not show a single microscopic expression of anger on your face. You do absolutely nothing. You anchor your feet. You hold their gaze with the cold, detached clinical curiosity of an apex predator observing a confused, frantic insect, and you count silently in the dark theater of your own mind. 1, 2, 3. Do you understand the crushing, unbearable weight of 3 full seconds of absolute silence in the middle of a heated, chaotic conflict? 3 seconds is an absolute eternity to a nervous system that is desperately running a manipulative script. In those 3 seconds, the predator's biological momentum violently collapses. The heavy kinetic energy of their attack meets the absolute, terrifying vacuum of your indifference. You are denying their brain the chemical dopamine hit of your friction. You are starving their fire of its required oxygen. When their brain fails to receive the anticipated response, the amygdala, the fear and control center of their mind, suddenly misfires. They realize, with a cold, creeping sense of dread, that they are not in control of the interaction. The illusion of their supreme power vanishes. But the heavy silence is only the first phase of the blade. To completely shatter the trance and guarantee the destruction of their script, you must combine the silence with a sudden, abrupt shift in your physical physiology. Your previous body language was part of their script. You were standing there, taking the abuse, acting exactly like the paralyzed prey in the web. You must violently break the visual pattern. As you hold the 3-second silence, you move with a slow, glacial, unbothered sovereignty. If you are sitting down, you slowly stand up, brushing an invisible piece of dust off your clothing as if you are entirely alone in a quiet room. If you are standing, you slowly turn your head and look out the window, completely breaking eye contact, signaling to their primitive brain that their manufactured drama is so profoundly insignificant that it does not even warrant your visual attention. You pick up a glass of water and take a slow, deliberate sip. You look at your watch with an expression of mild, absolute boredom. You are physically, biologically communicating to their limbic system. Your chaos has absolutely no jurisdiction in my reality. I am not a character in your movie. And then, after the 3 seconds have completely elapsed, after you have violently broken the physiological and visual pattern of the prey, you deliver the final, lethal strike to their cognitive processor. you deploy the non sequitur, the non-sequential response. When you finally open your mouth to speak, you absolutely do not address their accusation. You do not defend yourself against their manipulation. You completely ignore the existence of their entire script, treating it as if it was never spoken. You speak in a low, calm, almost hypnotic tone of voice, and you say something entirely unrelated to the emotional storm they just tried to violently create. You look them dead in the eyes, tilting your head slightly, and you ask, "Are you feeling okay today?" Your breathing seems incredibly frantic. Or you look thoughtfully at their forehead and say, "Did you sleep well last night? You seem deeply unwell." Or, the most devastating, dismissive response of all, you simply nod slowly, as if observing a fascinating biological specimen in a laboratory, and say, "Right. Anyway, I have some important work to finish," and you turn your back and walk away. This is the neuro-linguistic equivalent of ripping a heavy iron needle completely off a spinning vinyl record. The music violently screeches to a halt. The script is entirely, irreversibly destroyed. The manipulator's brain experiences a profound, terrifying cognitive glitch. In a fraction of a second, the predator goes from feeling like an apex hunter to feeling like an exposed, clumsy actor who has just forgotten all of his lines on a brightly lit stage. The sheer embarrassment and confusion of this neurological short circuit are absolutely devastating to a fragile narcissistic ego. Furthermore, by asking a non-sequential question like, "Are you feeling okay?" you are actively flipping the psychological frame of the entire interaction. You are taking the burning spotlight of scrutiny, which they aggressively tried to shine on your supposed flaws, and you are violently turning it back onto their mental stability. You are positioning yourself as the calm, healthy, sovereign observer, and you are framing them as the chaotic, unwell subject. You do not say this explicitly, you simply imply it through the glacial, unshakable calmness of your tone. Because you did not engage with the toxic content of their manipulation, they have absolutely nothing to push against. Their working memory drops the entire argument because it is suddenly forced to process why you are calmly analyzing their health or why you are simply walking away. You have forcefully rebooted their central processing unit. This is the supreme application of emotional sovereignty. You do not need to prove that you are right. You do not need to convince the manipulator of their own toxicity. Trying to make a sick mind see the truth is a profound, catastrophic waste of your irreplaceable vital energy. Your only objective is to break the trance, protect your own biology, and remain seated heavily upon the throne of your own peace. By executing the 3-second interrupt, you have completely shattered the hypnotic web. You have exposed the spider for the fragile creature it truly is. But the warfare is not over. What happens in the immediate, echoing aftermath of this cognitive glitch is the most dangerous, highly unstable moment of the entire interaction. This brings us to the third martial phase of our discipline, mastering the tactical void and watching the predator suffocate in the silence. When you forcefully push a manipulator off their rehearsed script, you create a massive, gaping vacuum in the physical space between you. The conversation has suddenly lost its entire structure. For the untrained, unmastered mind, a vacuum is a terrifying environment. Human beings are deeply, fundamentally conditioned by society to despise awkward silences. From a very young age, your culture has programmed your nervous system to act as a perpetual conversational peacemaker. If there is a sudden lull in a social interaction, or if someone appears uncomfortable, your automatic biological instinct is to immediately rush in and fill the void. You want to laugh nervously. You want to change the subject. You want to desperately explain the non-sequential question you just asked, simply to relieve the crushing, agonizing psychological tension hanging in the air. Listen to the cold, undeniable truth of mental warfare. The absolute second you open your mouth to relieve that tension, you lose the war. If you execute the brilliant 3-second interrupt and you watch the manipulator become confused, but then your own anxiety causes you to immediately apologize or to nervously try to smooth the situation over, You have just thrown a heavy lifeline to a drowning predator. You have reached down into the abyss and pulled them back up onto solid ground. You are signaling to their primitive limbic system that you are still submissive, you are still deeply afraid of their disapproval, and you are still willing to manage their emotional state for them. They will instantly grab that lifeline, regain their psychological balance, and restart their toxic script with twice the aggression and malice. To become psychologically lethal, you must master the ancient, brutal law of the void. You must become the heavy, unmovable abyss. When you drop the non-sequential response, and the manipulator stares at you in absolute, paralyzed confusion, you do absolutely nothing to help them process it. You lock your jaw. You maintain the cold, detached stare of the sovereign observer. You allow the silence to stretch from 3 seconds to 5 seconds to 10 long, agonizing seconds. You let the psychological tension in the room become so dense, so incredibly heavy, that it feels like physical water crushing their lungs. You must realize deep in your biology that this tension does not belong to you. The tension was entirely created by their initial manipulation, their lies, and their toxicity. You are simply refusing to carry the weight of it anymore. You are handing the massive, chaotic boulder of their own disease right back to them, and you are watching them struggle to hold it. Your own heart might beat faster as you hold this silence. Your ego will scream at you to be the bigger person and make peace. You must perform ruthless surgery on this conditioning. To hold the void is to understand that true peace is never achieved by surrendering to a terrorist. As you stand inside the tactical void, observing them with glacial indifference, you will witness a profound and pathetic biological unraveling. An emotional predator relies entirely on the illusion of absolute control. They wear a heavy iron mask of supreme confidence, moral superiority, and righteous anger. But when they are deprived of their script, and they are forced to stand entirely naked in the agonizing silence of your refusal to play their game, the mask violently slips. Watch their physical body. It will tell you the absolute truth that their words try to hide. You will see their eyes begin to dart rapidly around the room, desperately searching the environment for an escape route or a new angle of attack. You will see them shift their physical weight nervously from one foot to the other. Their breathing, which they previously used to project power and intimidate you, will suddenly become shallow, rapid, and erratic. And when they finally attempt to speak, because their fragile egos simply cannot bear the crushing weight of your silent judgment, they will not sound like an apex predator. They will stutter. They will stumble pathetically over their own words. They will suddenly backpedal, attempting to cowardly reframe their vicious, calculated attack as a simple misunderstanding or a bad joke. Or in a desperate final attempt to regain control of the narrative, they will instantly play the victim, aggressively accusing you of being cold, crazy, or unresponsive. Do you see the magnificent, terrifying power of the void? You have not raised your voice. You have not hurled a single insult. You have not burned an ounce of your own vital life force in a useless, draining debate. You have simply removed the structural support of your participation, and you have allowed the sheer gravity of their own unmastered disease to pull them down into the dirt. You have forced the spider to become violently entangled in its own web. When you witness this complete unraveling, your perception of the manipulator will fundamentally change forever. You will no longer see them as a terrifying, powerful force that dictates your reality. You will see them exactly as they are, a deeply insecure, highly fractured, spiritually bankrupt human being who relies on cheap parlor tricks to simulate strength. The fear will instantly evaporate from your nervous system, replaced by a cold, unshakable sovereignty. You have mapped the dark architecture of their trance. You have executed the violent, neuro-linguistic blade of the 3-second interrupt, shattering their rigid psychological pattern. You have mastered the agonizing discipline of the tactical void, refusing to throw them a lifeline, and you have watched the heavy iron mask of their supreme confidence crumble into pathetic, stuttering confusion. You have effectively disarmed the emotional predator. You have reclaimed the sovereign throne of your own prefrontal cortex, and you have protected your vital energy from being consumed. But the warfare for your absolute, unbreakable freedom is not yet over. There is one final, incredibly insidious trap waiting for you in the echoing aftermath of your victory. It is a trap built not by the intelligence of the predator, but by the deepest, most toxic programming of your own unmastered empathy. To secure your emotional empire permanently, we must now march directly into the execution chamber and face the ultimate illusion where an estimated 99% of humanity completely and tragically fails. We must sever the invisible, suffocating chains of the social approval matrix, and we must ruthlessly execute the disease of the savior complex. Why do so many of you learn these martial tactics, successfully deploy the pattern interrupt, watch the manipulator fall into absolute neurological panic, and then immediately run back into the burning building to save them? Why do you break your sovereign silence to apologize to the person who just tried to violently manipulate you? You do this because society has infected you with a deeply pathological definition of kindness. From the moment you were a young child, you were conditioned to be agreeable, polite, and accommodating. You were taught that causing social discomfort makes you a bad person. Your nervous system was wired to prioritize the emotional comfort of others over your own fundamental sanity. When you deploy the 3-second interrupt and the tactical void, you create a massive, heavy wave of social awkwardness in the room. You watch the manipulators squirm. You watch them look foolish, embarrassed, and completely disarmed. And in that exact moment, your unmastered mirror neurons violently fire. You physically feel their discomfort in your own chest. Your ego, addicted to being the good, civilized person, begins to scream at you. The manipulator, realizing that their aggressive script has completely failed, will instantly pivot to their secondary defense mechanism. They will play the victim. They will look at you with manufactured hurt in their eyes. They will subtly imply that you are being cold, cruel, and unreasonable for simply standing there in silence. This is the absolute razor's edge of mental warfare. If you allow your toxic empathy to dictate your behavior, you will feel a sudden, overwhelming wave of pity for the predator. You will feel guilty for causing them psychological pain. You will reach out your hand. You will break the heavy silence, and you will say, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things weird. Let's just talk about this." Listen to the devastating, brutal reality of human psychology. The exact millisecond you apologize to a predator for defending your own boundaries, you have surrendered the entire war. You have walked right back into the sticky center of the spider's web, and you have willingly handed the spider the very knife you just used to cut yourself free. You have proven to their primitive brain that your boundaries are an illusion, and that your absolute biggest weakness, your fear of being seen as the villain, can always be exploited. To become truly, psychologically lethal, you must completely annihilate the desperate need to be universally liked. You must embrace the terrifying, magnificent discipline of letting the bridge burn. When the manipulator looks at you with manufactured hurt, when they attempt to shame you for your cold, unshakable boundary, you do not flinch. You do not explain your tactic. You absolutely do not offer them a soft landing. You must accept that the price of owning your own mind is that you will inevitably become the villain in the chaotic, fictional narratives of deeply toxic people. Let them paint you as the villain. Let them run to their friends and tell a highly distorted, dramatic story about how terribly cold and unresponsive you were. Their false narrative has absolutely no jurisdiction in the physical reality of your empire. You must execute the savior complex. You are not on this earth to rehabilitate broken predators. You are not a psychological hospital for narcissists and emotional vampires. Your empathy is a sacred, magnificent, life-giving resource, and it must be guarded by massive iron gates. When you offer your empathy to someone who views it merely as a vulnerability to be hacked, you are not being a saint. You are being a willing accomplice in your own destruction. When the interaction is over, when you have delivered the non-sequential strike and held the void, you simply turn your back and walk away. You leave them entirely alone with the heavy, rotting weight of their own unmastered behavior. The psychological pain they experience in that silence is not your fault. It is the absolute unavoidable consequence of their own toxicity, finally colliding with a mind that refuses to break. You do not look back to see if they are okay. The spider is not your responsibility. I know the agonizing, invisible exhaustion you have been carrying deep inside your cellular structure for all these years. I know the profound, quiet tragedy of spending your entire adult life desperately trying to win a game whose rules were entirely written by the enemy. You have burned your precious, irreplaceable life force trying to logically explain your heart to people who were utterly committed to misunderstanding you. You have walked away from 1,000 conversations feeling crazy, drained, and fundamentally broken, carrying a toxic shame that never belonged to you. You were taught that if you just spoke the right words, in the right tone, the manipulation would finally stop. But the era of your desperate submission is now officially dead. The biological hemorrhage has been permanently stopped. You now possess the ancient, invisible martial architecture of the untouchable mind. You understand the hypnotic, mechanical nature of their script. You hold the devastating neuro-linguistic blade of the 3-second interrupt. You have mastered the heavy, suffocating gravity of the tactical void. And you have ruthlessly executed the pathetic, comforting illusion of toxic empathy, assuming the terrifying, magnificent weight of absolute emotional sovereignty. The scripts of the world are already written for tomorrow. The emotional predators are walking among us right now, actively searching for a fragile, agreeable host to infect. Tomorrow morning, when the sun rises and the manipulator opens their mouth, attempting to weave the sticky web of your destruction, what will you do? Will you obediently recite the submissive, defensive lines that they have written for you? Or will you deploy the absolute, terrifying void of the 3-second interrupt? Tear their script into 1,000 pieces and let them suffocate entirely in their own illusion. The choice is yours. The path is open. Amituofo.